We're back. It's time again for our college football sprint with Zach Smith. It's going to be like a 800-meter dash this time because we got a lot to talk about. Hope you guys are ready, but I'm excited. I'm excited for today and all the stories we had this past weekend and what we're looking forward to this weekend, which looks like an intriguing matchup with Maryland and Ohio State. But let's start with Rutgers. You know, it seems almost like a rewind of the week before, 3 completely dominant quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, it's like, I don't know if it's the foot off the gas or just falling back, but we allow a team to get back in one quarter of the game. Zach, why is that? What do you think is the reasoning behind it?
Well, I mean, you saw a number of things happen. One, I think this defense is not, I mean, we were so spoiled last year that we don't realize kind of what is normal. And not that we, it's almost like the whole COVID situation. Not that we need to accept this as a new normal, but it's different, right? Things are different. I mean, you went from the number 1 defense in every analytic: pass defense, run defense, red zone defense, covering, pass rush, you name it. They were the number 1 defense in America last year. And this year we're talking 55th, 62nd. Like, it's just different. Like, so one, I think the defense needs to improve a bunch. We don't have dynamic pass rush at all. Our best 2 pass rushers are interior D tackles. That's awesome that we have those dynamic guys inside, but we have to have an edge threat. And Jonathan Cooper certainly had fulfilled that to an extent in the Rutgers game. But I think you're just seeing, as a group, we're not as good as we were a year before. We had some guys leave, first rounders, like some of them generational talents, and we didn't have generational talents behind them. And that's just the reality of it. You also took a great player in a slot corner in Sean Wade and put him outside, and he's just going through some growing pains in that spot. And on top of that, you're facing Greg Schiano, who knows everything about the defense, everything about your program, everything. He's went against Ryan Day's offense in practice, day in, day out. And on top of all that, he decides to throw 50 million trick plays at you. It's like that combination is you're gonna give up some yards.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about with you, is that their offense and the plays that they chose to run were just, I mean, it was wild to watch the game just because I did not expect Rutgers to try so hard. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was definitely the one thing you noticed. I mean, I think this is the lowest margin of victory in the series history. I mean, Ohio State has won by 35 or more points in every time they've played. And what you saw was a little shift in culture for Schiano. Those kids played hard. They fought till the end. And they really, I mean, like you said, they played all the way to the fourth quarter, even though they were down 35-3 at half. I mean, you could see he's got a culture building there.
What do you think about they ran that, I think, twice on kick returns, the across the field lateral. It's like a 40-yard pass, basically. What do you think about that as a tactic in football? Do you think it's a meaningful way to play? Do you think it could be a part of a regular routine?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. We directional kicked my entire career, and I was a special teams coordinator for many years, and I believe in it to my core. And that is like it's almost like the last-ditch effort of a team to say, oh my gosh, like they're going to smoke us. They're going to just destroy us in this kickoff. Let's try something, and just like almost like jumping off a boat and trying to swim to shore. It's like they launch it across the field, and I've never seen it work until, and to be honest, it didn't work on Saturday. People want to bring it up. They threw a throwback on the punt return. The kids still have made 14 people miss. Like it wasn't like he was just wide open and waltzed in the end zone. Yeah. So people do it against directional kick teams. It's a last ditch kind of a trick way to try to beat it, because going against a directional kick, you think about it, you're pinned on either sideline and you have all 11 guys attacking you. Like you just lost 2/3 of the field. So it's a great, it's my favorite thing about special teams is the ability to do things like that. And that throwback thing, I mean, we scored a touchdown at Florida on it. Kid threw it back, kind of muffled it, and we had a guy get over there and scoop the fumble for a touchdown. So it's very risky, but teams do it.
And also the trick plays is the fans need to look at it is an acknowledgement by Schiano of how tough of an opponent he's facing for him to go to it at that level. Like, this is really what we have to do to even have a shot of doing anything against this team. So, you know, it was interesting. It made the game more interesting than it actually was. So I didn't mind it.
So more interesting than it was is the quote of the day.
Right.
Now let's talk about this running attack, right? It's like watching the game. Is this just that Ohio State is shifting its philosophy to pass first and the running game is secondary? Or do we really have some issues in the running game? And if so, what are they?
Well, I think it's like anything else. A great football coach is going to accentuate his best players, right? And so I don't think it's a cultural shift or an ideological shift to a pass first offense. I think the reality is we have a first round quarterback, first round receivers, and sixth round running back. So what do you want? Who do you want to touch the ball? I think they need to get a run game going. Or else Justin's going to start seeing some bizarrely different pass coverages that are not as run centric. But I mean, it's definitely an issue. It's a weakness. I love Master Teague for what he is, right? He is a short yardage back. He can run through anybody for 2 yards. But he's still, I can't remember. I think he's 102nd or 112th in the country in yards after contact. So that doesn't equate for me. If you're Jerome Bettis, you got to be Jerome Bettis, right? You got to break through tackles and get like 10 yards after contact because you're just this rumbling, tumbling bus, right? He's not. I mean, he goes down easily sometimes, and I just think he is great at what he does. He's a markedly improved pass pro run back over J.K. Dobbins. I mean, it's night and day pass pro because J.K. was awful at pass pro, and he's really good. So It's a gift and a curse. Like, what do you want? If Justin's going to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game, you want Master in to protect him, right? But if you want a guy that's going to take a run play 80 yards and maybe make 3 people miss, it ain't going to happen. It's not him.
Yeah, and Steel Chambers seems to have shown us a few signs, right? But he can't hold on to the ball. Tell us what that does, what that does and how that impacts a young player. How do coaches respond to that? You have to bench him, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. That's something that there's certain things that are core values of the program that you just doesn't matter who you are. You can't kind of cave in on them. And who cares if he's dynamic? If he can't hold on to the ball, it doesn't matter. You're going to lose games because of that. You probably won't lose games because you're only getting 5 yards a carry. You're going to lose games if you fumble 3 times. So that's just something that Tony has to get fixed in practice. I mean, just you get a bat, one of those ball security bats, and just beat the hell out of him when he has a ball in his hands. That's what you do until eventually he's like, it's second nature to just clench that ball tight high.
Yeah.
To be fair, when Garrett Wilson started, I remember he muffed quite a few kick returns and punt returns his first year. So maybe it is just a little bit of being on the big stage as being a young guy.
Yeah, I'm sure that has something to do with it, and you always see guys when they get into games, they start doing some things that maybe they aren't accustomed to doing or they don't do in practice, where now the kid sees he's got his opportunity on the field and he's trying to run faster so that ball gets loose because he's not holding it high and tight, which might slow him down. That the big stage can expose a lot of things.
Definitely can.
On the offensive side, I saw that they were running a lot of, very, very short rollout passes to the running backs using a lot of deception downfield, which I really appreciated. Do you think that's a alternative to the run game that can be effective for Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a great job with play action, boots, nakeds, those type of things. And I think it's definitely another way to get more high percentage, those 8-yard gains, those 9-yard gains that you have to have. And if it's not in the run game, you need them somewhere. And I just look at what Clemson does with Travis Etienne and they couldn't do it against Notre Dame, which is part of why Notre Dame won, but they do a great job of when the run game's not going, they get him involved in the pass game. And you just talked about it. If you get a guy like Trey Sermon in the game, maybe he's not a between the tackle back. I don't know, but you can do things with a quarterback like Fields, and Ohio State's doing a lot of it where it's quick touches. It's easy, high percentage throws where you're getting those chains moving a little bit without having to hand it off. So yeah, 100% that's what they're doing, and they're doing a great job of it.
Yeah, let's talk about BIA right now. Right now, we're not looking exactly like BIA. Obviously, we're replacing 2 first-round cornerbacks and Jordan Filler, who's showing that he deserved to be higher than a 6th-round pick as a starter with the Rams right now. So replacing that is difficult, right? You mentioned moving Shaun Wade from the inside to the outside. I've seen a couple plays, like a couple of the TDs. It seems like he's really trying to make the big play, flashy plays sometimes instead of just doing what's fundamental. Then we also lost Cameron Brown, and Now we have Tyreke Johnson, who, when I looked at that kid's high school tape, I was like, this is one of the best players I've ever seen play.
Yeah, no
But
doubt.
he's getting his first shot playing, and he's adjusting from safety in high school to corner in college. So should we just have patience here, or are there some fundamental issues that we also need to address?
Well, I mean, I obviously I don't know what Tyreke has done since I left, but he definitely was a very highly rated guy that came in and still had a ways to go. The talent's there, but it comes down to how much do you want to put faith in high school film or recruiting rankings compared to when guys develop and grind and grow and improve, and like, where is he at as a college level corner? And obviously he's not where he needs to be because he's their fourth guy right now. I mean, really, if he was their fifth guy, and now he's their fourth guy because Cameron Brown got hurt. But going back to your initial point, I think what you're seeing is Shaun Wade doing a little bit too much. He's trying to go for interceptions when he could go for PBUs. He's also adjusting to playing on the outside. And then you lose a guy like Cameron Brown, who was their fourth corner last year, should have been their second corner this year. Sevyn Banks kind of bypassed him. So he was one of your top three. That's a huge loss, especially considering the group isn't playing as well as they played last year. And then I think Sevyn Banks has probably been the shining light through three games. I mean, he's played really well. And Shaun will get that shirt up. That's not going to be something that is a season-long issue. He's just trying to go for some big plays, not really playing as physical as I think he's capable of playing, but he's going to be one of the best corners in the country by the end of the year. That's all I know.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he's a freaking talented guy. And I mean, he's always just a blast to watch, but I agree. Watching him this year, it definitely feels like he's still getting used to this new role as opposed to like thriving. And, it's like you can see the thought before the action sometimes and how he plays.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we can button up Rutgers for now. We'll come back and talk about Maryland a little bit later. But let's talk about this Notre Dame win. Brian Kelly finally beats a team that's worth beating, right? And let's talk about the game. I was really, really impressed with the running back play in that specific game from Notre Dame. That's the thing that stood out for me is in all three phases, pass pro, in the passing game and in the running game. I don't think I've seen a more complete overall game from a back since Zeke was roaming the field at Ohio State.
You know what? He was my player of the game in my episode that went out today, Tuesday, was Kyron Williams. He was ridiculous. And I've always liked him. I've liked him as I watched him all year. He's explosive. He's a solid back. He's also, my biggest knock was he's small. He's not a big back. But what he did on Saturday, he had 31 snaps in pass protection and only allowed one quarterback pressure in 31 snaps, which is just absurd, especially for a small back. I mean, you saw him a couple times fit up on a blitzing linebacker and, I mean, hit him right square in the nose, down the middle, and stand him up and hold his ground. And you're like, whoa, like, it's the best pass pro I've seen all year for sure, maybe in 2 years. It was phenomenal. And the other thing you saw was, Ohio State fans won't want to hear this, and they didn't like it when I said it before, but Notre Dame's O-line is the best O-line in the country, and it's not even close. Yeah. I mean, Ian Book had forever to throw the ball. Kyron Williams had lanes you could drive trucks through. It was domination up front. Yeah. And that let Kyron run. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that stood out to me as well. It looked like some plays they were 5 yards ahead of the line of scrimmage sometimes, pushing those backs.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like, Kyron would get the ball, and by the time he hit the heels of the offensive line, he gained 2 yards. And you're like, wow, that was easy.
What was exciting about this game, too, I mean, obviously the missing Trevor Lawrence is a big asterisk on the win for Notre Dame, which, is a bummer. But it's just, for me, college football overtime is the most entertaining thing in sports. I just don't think anything else comes close.
It really is. It really is. And you watch a kid like DJ Uiagalelei. You see what I did there? It took me like 100 practices to get that. DJ Uiagalelei goes in and throws for 400 yards, just dominates. And it's like, that's to me the best part about college football. The number one overall draft pick, probably, or two, goes down, and this kid steps in and just all of a sudden everyone is excited for next year's Clemson team because they're like, this kid's a freak. They know he's not going to play anymore this year, but he's a freak.
To come into a game on the road like that and play the way that he did is just, just amazing. And Zach, I think we got a business for you. You got to start a Samoan name app since
Well,
you can get them all right.
as long as people are patient, because it takes me 2 days to learn one name.
Oh,
But I do it. I'm not gonna sit here and call him ukulele like everyone else in the country. Like I'm gonna learn his name and call him what his real name is. It just might take me a minute.
So does this win or this game really change your sense of where Clemson and Notre Dame stack? Is it a mark at all against either team or for either team?
I mean, I think it's a mark. It's certainly a mark for Notre Dame. They have not been able to beat a team on this platform or stage or level in since the 90s, maybe. I mean, all the way back to 2012 when Alabama beat the brakes off them in every game since. So I think it's a huge win for not only Notre Dame, but the Midwest brand of football.
Yeah.
Because now you say, all right, we have two legitimate teams in the Midwest. How many do they have in the Southeast right now? They have Alabama, Clemson, if you want to call that's the Atlantic coast, but down south, everywhere has one or two teams. The Midwest has been one for like 10 years. So now we got a second one that finally showed that they can play tough. They exposed Clemson's line on both sides. Clemson had a bunch of injuries on defense, but their offensive line was supposed to be one of the best in the country, and Notre Dame dominated their offensive line. So I think it showed us that Clemson maybe has a couple leaks in the boat, and it showed us that Notre Dame's ready for the national stage. I don't know if they're ready to win it all, but they're ready for the national stage finally.
And it's also valuable. The other thing that's interesting is that Notre Dame is technically an ACC team this year.
Right.
And you're seeing for the first time in a long time, Clemson actually having a second somewhat legitimate team. And the first year that happens, they play in the regular season and they lose.
Right.
So, they're more than likely going to be a rematch in the ACC championship game.
And what happened to Zach? If you remember last week, I mean, Notre Dame must have been listening to this podcast because Zach, you said explicitly, Notre Dame's basically one of our Big Ten teams. They're a Midwest team, and we need them to do well.
Yeah, right. Yep. And Notre Dame fans love to hate me, but I've been saying it since I started the podcast. Like, I want Notre Dame to be relevant and good. Like, I want the brand of Midwest football to be better than the South. Like, I would love nothing more than Penn State be great. Like, it'd be awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of Penn State, so what happens though if we get down to the final game and Clemson beats Notre Dame in a close game? Do you have to put them?
I think you have a heck of an issue right now with that loss, because the reality is Clemson probably will win the rematch, right? I'm not here to say they're going to, but they probably will. Yeah. So you got to look at the national landscape. Like, what happens now, right? Okay, you can deduce that Ohio State probably will end the season undefeated, right? Barring some upset. They don't really have a tough game coming up outside of Indiana. So let's say they're in the playoffs, right? Then you got to look at the ACC, all right? Clemson and Notre Dame. Let's say Clemson wins that rematch. They both have one loss. Now you go down to the Southeastern Conference. Let's just assume Alabama beats Florida in Atlanta, right? Yeah. So now you have Alabama, Ohio State, and then who else? Yeah. Right. Clemson, Notre Dame are clearly two to talk about. Texas A&M has a hell of an argument. They lost to Bama early and beat Florida. Right. And then you go to the not so likelies, right? Yeah. Oregon, can they run the table, and will that sample size be big enough to make the playoffs? And then BYU, undefeated, with one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And my favorite, Cincinnati and Luke Fickell. Like, you have 9 teams that you're looking at to fill the 4 spots, and it gets really sticky if that happens. Now, if Notre Dame beats Clemson, then you're good. Clemson's out, and that's the 3rd team, and now you just need to argue about the 4th.
Yeah, that's going to be a mess if we get to that point. But, as we know with college football, we got a long way to go, and there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff that happens.
But I'm telling you, I'm starting the campaign now. It is 2020. Cincinnati will win the national championship. It's 2020. Like, that's too fitting for the year we're having.
Imagine if it's a Cincinnati Ohio State national championship.
Oh my gosh. And then Luke Fickell defeats the Buckeyes.
That would be a bizarre day in sports.
Oh, but the other thing to think about is if Ohio State plays Notre Dame in the playoffs or the national championship, just that will be the most monumental game in the history of the series.
It's a fun matchup, man. It's always such a fun matchup.
It is. Now let's talk about that team you said you wanted to be good, Penn State. They got the brakes beaten off of them by by Maryland this weekend.
Yeah,
See,
did.
it's so second nature. It was supposed to be Penn State
Right.
beating the brakes off of Maryland, but Maryland is showing us something right now. I think it says more about Maryland than Penn State. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it says a lot about both, really. And I've even said it on your show. I've said it on my show. Mike Locksley is really, really good. He just is. And he got Tua's younger brother to come in, and now he's got a quarterback. He's got some skill, and he's really intelligent, X's and O's, and kids play for him. Like, you talk about a guy that can rally the troops. He's unbelievable. The rapport he has with players. And you know why he is? Because he's just real. Like, he talks shit, he cusses, he doesn't try to be all uptight and asshole and professional. Like, he's himself, but he demands a high level of performance. So kids love him. Kids love him. That's why he's a great recruiter. That's why he's been a phenomenal football coach. And so I think it's definitely a testament to the fact that Maryland is on the rise with Locksley. But they had no business playing with Penn State, right? Like, they don't have the talent yet. Yeah. So it definitely says a lot about the state of the Nittany Lions right now. And it's just definitely time to hit the panic button. I mean, it might just be a push reset and start over next year, but man, Penn State looks bad. Were they 0-3 last in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I can't remember. Probably after all the mess happened is probably the last time they've been this bad.
Yeah.
The thing is, there's always hype about them, but I feel like some years it's always the game against Ohio State, right, where they play lights out. But it's outside of that, I just sometimes feel like they're just not locked in as a team.
Yeah, it's a different type of program. That's all I really know. I mean, it's that way in recruiting. I mean, we when we would lose a recruit to Penn State, it was because Penn State is fun and they're cool and they're hip and the coaches are really cool, and it's like, okay, well, we're not at Ohio State. We're not cool at all. Like, we just really coach you hard and develop you. So if you want to go there, and they do. So it's a different culture there than I'm accustomed to.
What do you mean by that?
Like, there's recruiting visits, and when recruits would talk to their players, they're like, no, these coaches are so laid back, man. They're chill, they're cool, and it's like, okay, we're not. Like, and I don't know how you can be. You kind of have to coach guys really hard. And, every now and then you got to be an asshole. Like, you just do. Like, and that's not what they do there. And it's very different. But they've had success. But in my opinion, that's why they can't get over the hump.
You know what, Zach? This is the knowledge that you dish out, man. That I'm just like, wow, I never ever would have known that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to hear, because it seems like James Franklin is kind of he's a cool guy, but it seems like he's no nonsense at the same time. But that's very surprising to hear. And one of the more fun things that happen, because you establish yourself as one of the top recruiters in the nation. The recruiting dynamic that this potentially could shift, right? With Penn State really has relied on the Maryland, Virginia, Northeast kind of area for recruiting for a long time. And immediately after the game, Maryland took a shot. With
the most savage tweet I've ever seen in college athletics.
And it goes to show you that there's the game, but there's also the game behind the game. And talk to us a little bit about that in terms of why Maryland needed to do that to establish themselves recruiting wise in their backyard.
Well, I mean, Maryland has been fighting that. They want to recruit the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. That's what they need to do. That has to be their footprint. And if they're going to ever be that upper tier Big Ten team, they have to get those top Chase Young players to go to Maryland. Mm-hmm. They have to, or else they're never going to play with Ohio State or Penn State. And so putting a beating on Penn State the way they did, and then tweeting out the tweet with the graphic that says "You were, we are," is just like, oh shit! Like, shots fired, and they're big shots. But it's critical. It's critical because they can't lose kids. And Penn State has a slew of Maryland and Virginia kids on their roster, and Maryland can't lose those kids if they're expected to compete with Penn State. So when they get this opportunity, it's like a teachable moment, right? With your kid. If your kid does something bad, it's an opportunity to teach them and gain some momentum, right? Some growth. That's what Maryland had. It's like an opportunity here where we beat them. We got to capitalize and make sure everyone knows about it. Talk a little shit, get people to sway our direction. So in 2 years, we can get that sophomore in high school because he thought our tweet was awesome, talking trash. You know what I mean?
Yeah. that stuff is valuable.
Really valuable.
These kids pay attention to all of that.
Especially these days. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
a few years back, there was that, I think it was Tate Martell hurdled that kid in
Oh,
high
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
That tweet went crazy.
Crazy.
Unbelievable.
That's why you're going to see it more and more. And I don't know that there are any right now, but college coaches are going to start TikTok accounts. Like it's just, that's the way the youth trends. You're going to see 60-year-old men doing like TikTok dances. I promise you're going to see it.
I already
see it.
Yeah. You guys see, I haven't paid attention. I'm sure you have. I'm sure there's already coaches and people doing that.
Definitely, especially in the basketball world, you see it all the time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I bet.
More, I even feel like I remember Saban doing something funny too, but I'm not going to quote myself on that because I don't believe it myself.
It's almost kind of weird to see these coaches who have like a hard ass reputation do like a TikTok dance with their daughter or something.
Right.
It's a weird thing. There's a lot of athletes on there that their kids want them to do a dance with them, so they do it as a family.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I did. Now that you mentioned, I do remember seeing Luke Fickell do a TikTok dance one time, and I was like, of all people in the world, last person I think I would ever have guessed to be doing a TikTok dance is Luke Fickell.
We actually talked about it with him when he came on the show. Oh man, that is hilarious.
Anything for recruiting. That's the company line. Anything for recruiting.
And we had more Big Ten news. I don't even know what to say anymore about this school up north. I will say this. I feel like we'll not talk about them because they're not worth talking about. I'm very impressed with Indiana and what they're doing as a basketball-rich school. They look like a well-coached team that's playing at an optimal level. And when you're like a lower tier program, that's all you can do is to expect to play above your level of talent. And I'm really impressed with the fact that that's what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, Indiana's the second best team in the Big Ten. And I don't know that it's even close, really. I mean, they're so well coached. Their defense is so fundamentally sound. They go extremely hard. They tackle well. The stuff that a well-coached team does, right? You don't have to be talented to be well-coached and to be disciplined and to play with fundamentals. You still might get beat by 30 if you're not talented, but you can do those things. Us three could go play football and we could do those things. We would suck, but we could do them, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's cool is Indiana has a little bit of talent now. They have a couple guys that were maybe underrated, got developed, and they're doing those things. And so you're seeing the second best team in the Big Ten is the Indiana Hoosiers. Who'd have thought?
It's unbelievable.
Never, ever would I have guessed that. And
Never.
It's 2020, and that's how life is now.
Right.
Yeah. Now let's talk about potentially the worst team in the Big Ten, the team that they beat. We talked about it quite a bit last week. Do you fire this guy mid-season now? Do you have to send a signal now, or is it overdoing it? Is this just a bad season and a bad team that's an aberration?
I'll play I'm the Michigan AD right now, right? I'll play the role for you, V. I definitely, I don't know that I fire him today, but I'm doing everything every day. I'm not worrying about any other sport. I'm not talking to anyone in my administration, nothing. From now until the end of the year when I fire him, I'm working every day to find the next Ryan Day. Because in my opinion, the trend in college football is moving towards and has been moving towards finding that elite coordinator at a big time place and anointing him your next head coach. That's what Clemson did. That's what Oklahoma did. That's what Ohio State did. That's what Georgia did. That's what teams are doing, right?
Yeah, right.
The days of needing to be an established head coach are long gone, right? And in my opinion, that's been Michigan's issue.
What's that? They've been doing it for a while, though. It's not like it's recent, right? It's
no.
I mean, Tom Herman, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, you see that at Houston's, but for a big time program like Ohio State or Michigan to hire a coordinator 15 years ago, they'd be like, that'll never happen. But then Clemson did it with Dabo, and Clemson back then wasn't really Clemson, right? They were a second tier program. But when Oklahoma did it, it was like mind blowing. Then Georgia did it. Then Ohio State did it. And now it's like, and look at the results they're getting. Yeah. And in my opinion, it's because you take a coach like Matt Campbell at Iowa State, great football coach. Maybe he'll be one of the best in the country at Michigan. Maybe he'll elevate him. Who knows? But they haven't been on that elite step for a while,
Yeah.
right? And Matt Campbell, shoot, he was the head coach at Toledo forever, the head coach at Iowa State now for however many years. He hasn't been on the national landscape, whereas you hire a coordinator who's running, 50 kids one side of the ball at Ohio State or wherever. That coach knows exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
If he's the right guy, right? And so if I'm Michigan, that's what I'm doing. I'm not firing him right now, but I'm firing him at the end of the year, and I'm going to make a hire where people go, "What? Whoa, who's that guy?"
No, we don't like giving advice to the enemy, but we need that. You have said it over and over on our show that we need Michigan to be good, right?
I mean,
so
I get Ohio State.
Who are some names that you would tell if you were advising the AD and you're one of these $1 million search firms?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I don't know. I'd really have to think about that. That's a great question. I'm gonna have to think about that because I don't know. I'm trying to think of guys that I know that are coordinators, but I don't want to.
So while you think about that, I have a follow up. This has been, to your point, a slide that we've been watching for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Is it the AD's fault? Are we beyond the coach's responsibility at this stage?
Well, I mean, at some point it has to be, right? You brought in Rich Rod, who was one of the hottest coaches, one of the best coaches in the country at West Virginia. He failed. You brought in Brady Hoke, who was one of the best coaches at San Diego State. He failed. You brought in the prodigal son, Jim Harbaugh. He's failing. At some point, you could just keep recycling big-time coaches that have success somewhere else. At some point, maybe it's the situation they're walking into, right? Yeah. Maybe you don't have the proper infrastructure or support or recruiting or marketing or whatever to reach that elite level. And so it's going to take a concession by the administration to the right head coach, where that head coach walks in and says, "This is what I demand for us to be successful." And the administration has to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, the excuse they keep leaning on is their academic standards, and it's
criminally misrepresented.
And I'll tell you, as someone who went to Georgia Tech and there's real academic standards, like those players are still able to play.
Right?
We just had a terrible coach that wanted to only run triple options every single play.
Yeah,
but
there's no doubt.
Great athletes that are going to the league every single year from that program, and same for Michigan. Great athletes going to the league every single year. If you can't build a system around that,
I'm not going to put any individual kid's academic prowess out there. But I recruited against Michigan on a couple South Florida kids, so they can save the narrative that it's the academic standard. Man, get out of here. I've seen some kids that got into Michigan, and they also offer everyone Ohio State offers. So I hate to break it to you. That's not it. Like, that's an excuse. It's just something they're saying because they feel like that's how they can pound their chest. They can't beat Ohio State in football. They can't beat them in any sport at all. And now they're saying, okay, well, we'll beat you in the books. We have better academics. That's why. It's like, no, you don't. Sorry. That's not the case.
And it's also a very unfair representation of the changing landscape of college athletes. Like, I know these kids that come to Ohio State. Like,
right.
We're not talking about the John Cooper era anymore.
Right. No.
You're talking about kids that get it done on the field, get it done off the field. And it's an unfair criticism because it says something about players and kids at other programs that I don't think is fair. And is wrong as well.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And I'll tell you right now, we at Ohio State, we rarely took a kid that was even close to the qualification standard. Rarely. Most of the time, if he was even flirting with that low of a test score or that low of a GPA, like, there was an extensive research done on why. Is he not very smart? Then he probably is not going to make it at Ohio State. He's not the kid we want, right? Or is he lazy? Not the kid we want. There's also other factors, right? Does a kid have an IEP? Maybe he just doesn't learn very well. With a learning specialist, he could thrive here, right? Yep. You do the research and find out why a kid doesn't have a 3.3 GPA, and there might be a good reason. And I'm like I said, I'm not going to because it would be unfair to a kid, but I could list you 10 players that maybe had a learning disability or something wrong that, when accommodated, ended up being like a 3.5 college student, like, and just went on to great things. It's like that's not always a precursor to just an idiot. Sometimes there's a real reason,
Yeah.
It's such a commentary on our education system too, right? It's just not personalized. It's so mass market that, a lot of people don't thrive. And to your point, V, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up. we do need to eliminate the notion of athletes being dumb, because that's just
Right.
not the reality anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it was in the past. I mean, I don't know any of those people personally to a great degree, right? But every athlete that I tend to meet these days, especially these younger kids, are freaking brilliant.
I'm gonna tell you, if I were to give you a list, and I'd have to think about it, of the top 10 people I've ever met, like smart, brilliant, could be president if they were, if they wanted to, obviously. But I mean, Joshua Perry, Malcolm Jenkins, like I could go down the list and name 10 people. It's like, wow, that's the most impressive human being I've ever met.
Josh
right?
Perry, I grew up with his older brother.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful family. Wonderful.
Unbelievable. And
I mean,
that's
so impressed.
And that's just two off the top of my head. I literally could list 10 right now that could go on to be the CEO somewhere, and it's like, you're right. That's a horrible misconception. And it's also a cop out is what it is. It's an excuse. Like, oh, I stubbed my toe. That's why I only ran a 4.6. Like, no, you didn't. You're slow. Shut up.
Yeah. It's very unfair. It's very unfair to characterize it that way. But that's what losers do, is
That's a fact.
Make excuses versus
and you know what? And never mind that. That's how you don't get better. Right? That's how you always stay where you are. You just stay there because you're making excuses instead of just figuring out the problem and fixing it.
Bro, thank you for saying that. Accountability is everything, right?
Everything.
It's like there's more to be gained from assuming everything is in your control and you can always get better than there is from assuming that you have a certain level of skill. Right?
Absolutely.
It's just that humble kind of like chip on your shoulder attitude will always lead you the right direction.
I mean, look at their opponent that they played this weekend. That's as far as you need to go to see an example, right?
And you know what? Urban used to say it all the time, and you see it from Jim Harbaugh. So that's why I'm hesitant to blame the administration, because I watched Jim Harbaugh, and he does Urban's biggest pet peeve was BCD, right? Blame, complain, defend. You weren't allowed to do any at Ohio State. Like if a kid wasn't very good, you weren't allowed to blame the kid's ability. You weren't allowed to blame the fact that he doesn't work hard. He would never let you complain about your players aren't any good or whatever. And he never let you get defensive on yourself. And so those were the three things you weren't allowed to do. So the only option was identify the problem and fix the problem. And you see Jim Harbaugh in every press conference. It's complaining about the spot. It was this far. Everything he does is blame and complain and defend. He has a cultural issue within his own body that he is portraying onto his team. I swear to God.
It seems like it.
That's so wise. My God, Zach, that was awesome. I'm keeping that clip. I'm sharing it with my team. Let's move this thing forward. So Florida, Georgia. This is, by the way, I went and actually saw this game, not last year, but the year before. And I got to go with, sorry to name drop, some of our Lasso family members, Champ and Boss Bailey. And I mean, obviously Georgia legends. And dude, fantastic experience. It's such a passionate fan base there. We got to watch some of it on the field. It was sick. And it gave me so much respect for the rivalry that they built. And, for the students, it's like one of the biggest weekends of the year, because they all go down, they get down to some of the islands around where they play the game, and they just party. So fun game, a lot of culture and a lot of tradition around it. And, both teams very good this year, but I was surprised to see Georgia not really put up more of a fight.
Yeah. So first I want to talk about it because I was at Florida for 5 years and I didn't know you've been. That's the coolest thing in sports. I swear, just the way they split the stadium right in half, orange and blue on one side, red and black on the other. And then the Woodstock atmosphere outside of the stadium is just insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
That's a whole lot of fun, man. And
a whole lot of fun.
Huge stadium.
Huge. It's one of my favorite things that I did in coaching. It wasn't the biggest game. It wasn't the loudest or the most heated rivalry. It was just one of the most unique things. So that's cool. You got to go too. I'm glad I could talk to someone about it. Most people up here, it's like, yeah, it sounds cool. I don't know.
I've heard about it. About it.
I saw it on game day one time. But yeah, that game was, man, Georgia was exposed. They have a quarterback issue. And so I did a segment, and it'll be great conversation for your show and you guys also, is think about Kirby Smart back in May.
Yeah.
But not only, he has the one thorn in his side. He just watched Justin Fields almost win a Heisman, and he was going to have to watch him this year possibly win it. So that was the one thorn in his side. But he said, all right, I screwed that up. Jake Fromm, I picked him over field, screwed it up. So he went out and got 2 transfer quarterbacks. The kid from Wake and then the JT Daniels from USC, right? He brought in 2 established starters for the quarterback position. And then the kid at Wake opts out, doesn't play this year. And JT Daniels, he puts him at 3rd string. And they're playing with the most inept quarterback play I've seen in the SEC in 5 years. Wow. I mean, Stetson Bennett is he's like the principal's kid that like you're just forced to play. I don't know what, if he has like naked pictures of Kirby Smart, I don't know what it is, but this kid should not be playing quarterback in the Southeastern Conference. And they bring in the kid, Dwan Mathis, who's a freshman. I mean, he's going to be a good player, but he's so young and raw. It's just, they were a mess.
I'll also say, I mean, just keep in mind that Georgia tends to be a little bit, the gentlest way to say this is old school, maybe outdated Southern values in terms of how they run their culture, how they run their team, and especially the major donors that are around the program.
Oh, for sure.
Tend to be a little bit, I'm really using some innuendo here, but old school, you know what I mean? So
I know
there's
exactly
definitely some weirdness culturally down there that I think it's hampering their ability to be great.
There's no doubt. Whatever's behind it, Florida exposed it. I mean, they dominated them, and they really went after the kid that I was really, I don't want to say upset with, but Tyson Campbell, the corner at Georgia, in my opinion, is a 1st-round corner. He's one of the best corners I've ever recruited out of high school. And he went there and he was playing phenomenal until Alabama. Alabama went after him and torched him, and so did Florida. And it's like they found they took a page out of Nick Saban's playbook and just went after the kid. And I mean, he gave up, I think, like 200 some yards and 3 touchdowns. And it was just like, ooh, sheesh.
What was it specifically that they exploited about him?
Just one-on-one coverage. They just went after him. They threw it. I mean, they didn't even, it's not even like they put their best player on him. It was just whoever was lined up on him. If it was one-on-one, they were taking the shot, and they hit it.
So what would make him such a great player if he can't handle one-on-one coverage?
Well, you know what? It's you talk about cornerback play. You saw it a lot with Damon Arnett, right? Damon Arnett, not his last year, but the year before, he would have a game where he looked great and then a game where he would just get torched. And you're like, damn, Arnett, what are you doing? And it's like, some kids just have a different mental makeup where one bad play leads to 30. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. And it's like, it's really hard to do. If you're going to be a one-on-one corner, it takes a dog mentality and a short memory and kind of that discipline to, if you get beat, forget it, move on, right? It's really hard to do for some people. And I think that's kind of how Tyson is. He's a great kid, big heart, cares a lot, probably gets really upset with himself if he doesn't make a play once and that turns into 7 more, you know, and it's one of the hardest positions to play, unless you're just absolute dog, or if you're dumb, sometimes that's good because you forget.
To me, it is the hardest position. Obviously, quarterback requires the most, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of actual skill set, what it requires to essentially play backwards is remarkably difficult. And I think from a technique standpoint, it is the most difficult position.
I don't have the background of you, obviously, Zach, but I got to watch like a lot with Champ as he trained some of the newer guys that got drafted into the NFL about a year back. We did some content, and you know, just seeing like the amount of intelligence and awareness that goes into even just body positioning, the way you turn your hips, the way your feet go.
Yeah,
I mean, it's such detail heavy work being a corner, because you have to adapt to everything, but at the same time you have to understand the other player, your guardian's tendencies, plus the quarterback's tendencies, plus you have to be aware all around. If someone else gets beat, you have to be able to provide some help. So I mean, that's tough.
It's so difficult because you're talking about it's intentional movement, intentional fundamentals, right? But it's reactionary.
Yeah.
And you combine those two worlds, it's like, holy shit, you want me to do what? Like, I have to take this exact step with my foot at this exact angle. My hand has to be right here, but that's only if he steps there. If he steps here, totally different job description. It's like, my God, I'm good. I'll run a post. Thanks.
I mean, Georgia obviously has some issues, but I don't want to undermine how well Florida is playing right now. Specifically on the offensive side of the ball, it's really, I'm really happy to see the kid Grimes, who you recruited, Zach, get in a position where he's shining. He went through a lot. He had to transfer back to Florida, not because he necessarily wanted to leave Ohio State, but because he had some personal and family issues to regain his footing and get a chance to play, as well as Kyle Trask continuing to impress as a quarterback. I think those two things, despite Dan Mullen being their coach, I think we really have to we have to give them a pat on the back.
Yeah, I'm all about deserved credit, right? Like Kyle Trask deserves credit for playing the way he's playing right now. I mean, so I have this stat that I always refer to. It's how does a quarterback perform on throws that are 10 yards or further downfield? Because I really don't care if you can throw screen passes or little quick touches, bubble screens. Like anyone in the country should be able to do that. I want to know, how good are you over 10 yards? That's where real quarterbacks play. That's what I always say. That's where the real quarterbacks live, right? And he was phenomenal. He was 12 of 15 over 10 yards, 80% completion percentage. He was just outstanding. So you have to give him credit there. And you have to give Florida's defense credit because they just shut down Georgia's inept offense. The only issue I have with Florida right now from being a national contender is their skill at receiver. And I love Trayvon. He made an unbelievable play in that game, and he's made a couple of those this year.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for him to be a real receiver, because those plays he's a big body, fast guy, and he high points a ball. They're excellent and necessary, but I need a complete receiver, right? And their top 5 players on offense for Florida in the pass game, top 5 graded receivers were 3 running backs and 2 tight ends. And so I need to see more out of the receiver group for me to call it, like for me to predict they're going to beat Alabama. It's never going to happen unless they have some receivers that develop and grow and show me they can run intermediate routes and one-on-one cuts and things like that and defeat a corner one-on-one. That's my only criticism of Florida. Other than that, they were outstanding.
Yeah.
So speaking of, running backs and tight ends, there was a lot of really interesting tight end play that I saw this weekend. I
think that's one of the things that, and I've been, I don't want to say disappointed in Ohio State because they've done a lot of 2 tight end stuff, but I think that going into this year, that is the trend. That is where college football is going. Everyone has some fast receivers. Everyone has a good back. That tight end position is such a weapon, because if you have a guy that is a legitimate receiver, like an NFL receiving tight end that can also block, and you put 2 of them on the field, you can be in a 2 tight end run set, and then the next play be an empty with viable receivers. That is the most dynamic ability for a play caller imaginable. And you're right. I've seen it a bunch. 3 tight end sets, 2 tight end sets.
How few and far between are those guys when you're recruiting?
Really, really rare. I mean, really rare for a kid that's big enough, strong enough to block a defensive end that can also run routes, efficiently move, and have at least above average speed and hands. That they're just really, really rare. Really rare. A lot of times they end up being guys like the guy that you probably know from Georgia Tech, Darren Waller. Like they're big, tall guys that all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, he's 265. He might be a tight end now. He came in at 210. Those are the guys that they just blossom out of nowhere and put on 50 pounds and they can still run. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah. And you brought it up, like Ohio State, we always are able to get, I think Rucker is one of those guys, right?
He should be.
Yeah, when he came out of high school, what is preventing, and it's not just Ryan Day, across our coaches, why haven't we been able to have a tight end really blossom at Ohio State?
So I'm going to be honest. When you look at like who are the best tight ends in the country right now, Kyle Pitts at Florida. Okay, why do you know that though? Because they don't really have great outside receivers. So he has to carry that workload, right? Brevin Jordan at Miami, because they don't really have outside receivers. Like a lot of times these guys that look like freaks in college are a focal point because they are one of the only players that can produce. You know what I mean? And it's never going to happen at Ohio State. I mean, we had Jeff Hireman, Nick Vanette, both still playing in the NFL. They maybe caught 15, 20 balls a year, but it's not because they weren't good enough. It's because, well, I'd rather throw it to Devin Smith and Michael Thomas. That's why.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's a lot of times it's just a lack of talent gives a player like that the opportunity to be the main focal point.
Yeah. I mean, one other couple quick things before we leave is Hugh Freeze at Liberty. Like I didn't even know Liberty had a football program. This guy went out about as unceremoniously as you could at Ole Miss.
That's for sure.
Probably the reason why he's at a place like Liberty. But it's just amazing to see a program that no one's ever thought of as a football program now be a top 25 team. And is he really a good coach? It has to say something about him as a coach, right?
I mean, clearly he is, right? I mean, you couldn't say he was at Ole Miss because he bought and paid for everyone, and they still didn't win shit.
Yeah.
So, but what he's doing at Liberty is like, it's impressive, but who knows? I mean, maybe he cleaned up his personal life. He's got more time to focus on his job. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. And do you think our guy, we talked about him a little bit earlier, but I think Cincinnati's in the top 6 and BYU's up pretty high. If do you think there's a legitimate shot of either of those teams getting in?
I think there is a legitimate shot, and I think it will only come if Alabama runs the table, beats Florida. Alabama's in. The thorn in Cincinnati's side is Texas A&M. They're going to need Texas A&M to drop a game down the stretch that they shouldn't lose. And if they do, then you're going to say, all right, we got if Notre Dame beats Clemson again, you got Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama. Who's the fourth, right? I think it's Cincinnati if A&M loses another game, because you can't put a 2-loss Clemson team in over an undefeated Cincinnati. You just can't put a 2-loss team in. And then it's going to come down to, all right, is Oregon a no-loss or a 1-loss team? Then Cincinnati's out. So they need a lot of things to happen. It's got to be 3 clear undefeateds and then a bunch of 2-loss teams, and Cincinnati's undefeated and winning convincingly. And then they'll sneak them in, I bet.
What's that potential upset for Texas A&M? Is there a particular matchup?
No. I mean, it's going to have to be, I'd have to pull up their schedule, but I looked at it last week. I mean, the SEC is just so down, especially the SEC West. Like, I mean, who could potentially beat Texas A&M in that conference? No one. I mean, outside of Florida and Alabama, I don't think anyone, and they already beat Florida, lost to Alabama. So I don't know who. I don't think anyone else can beat them. They're going to have to really, or maybe they have like COVID hits and they lose Kellen Mond and another star player. That's a possibility, right?
Yeah, that's always a possibility with the times
right.
we're in. That's interesting. It's going to be a very interesting, despite the fact that we have a shortened season. I feel like this is going to be just as exciting of a stretch run as any other season with what's going on right now.
No, I agree. I think it's, you know what, it's going to be different. It's going to be, obviously, we're already seeing it's different, but it's not going to lack in excitement and controversy. Someone's going to get left out, even if 2 conferences cancel football because of COVID. Someone still is going to be left out and complaining. Like, it's going to be the same as every other year on that front. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be controversial, and someone's going to win a national championship, and everyone's going to complain about a couple flags. Like, it's just that's what's going to happen.
Yep, and the last thing we obviously got to talk about is this weekend, what's coming up this weekend. The big matchup is, we didn't think it was going to be that important of a game, 2 weeks ago. But Ohio State's playing Maryland this weekend. Maryland is playing really good football. They've got a bright young coach. What do you think about this matchup? Is it going to be a blowout, or do you think we've got to be careful with this one?
I think you're going to see. I'm nervous about it, to be honest with you. I think Ohio State's offense will be the difference maker. I don't think Maryland stands a chance in hell of stopping Ohio State and Justin Fields from throwing the ball. But my concern is if Ohio State still struggles running the ball, and the way the defense has looked, I know that Mike Locksley is there. That offense is going to pose major problems for Ohio State, because this is not Rutgers offense. It's not going to be trick plays. Like, he's very, very smart, and he has better talent than Rutgers. And it makes me nervous. I think Ohio State wins. I don't even know what the spread is, but I think there's going to be some 26 questions. What is it?
I think it's 26 or something like that.
Yeah, I'm taking Maryland plus
26.
I
don't know.
But I think more than anything, you're going to walk away from the game probably feeling kind of bad about something, like running the ball, pass defense. There's going to be something in that game where we leave the game saying, ooh, I'm nervous about that.
Yeah. Are there any other matchups this weekend?
Ooh, I haven't even looked at the slate. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't looked at the weekend schedule yet. I know we got MACtion tonight, though.
Who's playing in the MAC tonight?
Ohio U plays, and Miami of Ohio play. I can't. Ohio University has a game, and Miami of Ohio have a game. I can't remember who they're playing, but we got Tuesday MACtion. That's all I care about right now.
Yeah. Let's see what the MAC's talking about.
Right.
Oh man, awesome, Zach. Thanks so much for your time this week. As always, enjoyed this college football sprint with you. We're excited to catch up on Ohio State and Maryland this weekend, and hopefully we'll see a nice Buckeye win, and hopefully we won't feel bad about anything, but I'm sure we will.
Right. Let's hope not.
All right,
man.
Zach.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, fellas.
All right.
All right.